Here we come. Oh, Jimmer, thank you so much.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for you if a putrid slut you're troweling out.
Pus-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome our dear friend Philip Ittner, who is stateside right now, if I can use the vernacular of both journalists and military people. Good to have you with us.
Good to be back. Good to be on.
Yes. How does it feel to be on the show in the morning? I think is the first.
Yeah, I know. I can have my coffee, and
Right.
know, instead of reading the newspaper, I'll just I'll catch up on the first hour, and then I'll get involved in the second.
That's right. So, a lot has been going on in Ukraine over the last couple of weeks. Oh my God, the Kherson dodge, the head fake of Kherson, yeah, and then the push through Kharkiv, and then the necessitation of the Russians to shut down the rail lines for fear that they would continue that onslaught south at the same time because they were making so much progress. So catch us up on your take on a lot of stuff. I know you've been watching both in your travels and from afar.
I've been actually most of the time. I've been back in the States. I've been in Michigan, where my family is originally from, and we still have a little cottage on the lake. So I've been kind of decompressing. I haven't been watching it intrinsically because I have wanted to kind of separate myself and, as I say, get some rest and relaxation. But I couldn't, avoid it, obviously. And I'm talking to my friends who are still there and very much in touch with them. What I find very funny being in America during all of this is all this kind of, oh my God, who'd have thought they could do this? And I'm sitting here going, well, me for about 6 months.
Yeah, me too. Like and with a sort
once they
I still think Putin can pull it out.
Once they didn't take Kiev. Yeah, right. Yeah, okay, Jimmy.
Right.
Once they didn't take Kiev, and once they didn't decapitate the government, and even then, I said, then it'll be a partisan war, it'll be a guerrilla war, that the Ukrainians will never stop fighting for their right to self-determination.
Right.
But, once they didn't take Kiev and that whole disaster of them saying, oh, we're just reorganizing, we're focusing on these. Sure, it's because you got your posterior handed to you.
Right.
But yeah, okay. Ever since then, I was like, well, it's not only is it not going to have to fall back onto a partisan guerrilla war that could last for who knows how long, that now you're living on borrowed time. Russia, go home. It's lost. You might as well, there's no way for you to win. And the fact that the longer it went on with the sanctions and with the way that the Russian military was deteriorating, while at the same time Ukraine was getting stronger and stronger almost daily.
And still is.
I remember a time when everybody was, and still is, and will continue to do so. I remember a time when everybody was saying, "Oh, this artillery fight that's happening, and this kind of World War I, they're just gonna take it methodically, inch by inch, meter by meter, and
salami slicing through
all this land." And I was sitting there going, "No, that's not going to happen either." And the longer this goes on, the stronger the Ukrainians are going to get, and eventually there'll be a strong counteroffensive.
Exactly.
I thought it was going to be Kherson. I fell in for the same kind of Masarovka, as the Russians would call it, the kind of the
head fake.
The fake war, the head fake, the fooled you of Kherson, because I thought they were going to go for the. I really thought they were going to go for the canal. I think they still will.
Yep.
But I knew that Kharkiv was definitely fertile ground. But to see the speed with which they did it, I mean, there's no question anymore. There's I don't think globally there's no question.
No.
The Ukrainians are a match for the Russians. At the very least, I'm going to be gracious here in my underestimation. for all those guys who are still, saying Russia's a mighty army. The Ukrainians are also a mighty army.
Yep.
And they have will, they have motivation, they have esprit de corps, they have the wind at their back.
Yes.
And they're going to win. There's no question.
I agree. It's interesting looking at the sort of turn in language is fascinating. But watching people who still are, they've been dead ending with the Russians for quite some time, especially in what I would call the fringe press in the United States, both hyper right and hyper left. The redacted news, the ex Fox guy who's down in, I think he's running from lawsuits, so he can't be in the country. So he broadcasts from Portugal with
the
his wife.
redacted guy.
Yeah. And then former
he'll go to Serbia. He'll go to Serbia, but he won't go to Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. And he won't go to the United States because he built a bunch of people from Indiana out of their life savings
in a courtroom.
As you do, right? And then, and then what would arguably be the alleged hyper left, those that shall not be named. But watching them refuse to even acknowledge this, and watching them sound exactly like the video clips we're seeing from Julia Davis, from the Channel One, from 60 Minutes, from Solodyev and Vladimir. That's right, Solodyev, right? The dude who wears the beetle buttons.
Sovolyev.
Yeah.
Sovolyev, and then Margarita Simonian.
Yeah.
Or I'm just temporarily gapping the woman who's the host of her own show. But they're all nutbags.
Right. Well, at this
and
point,
they all lie.
Yeah. Well, at
but
this
even
point,
they are now having to say,
right. They're having this weird dial back, and they're my favorite part of the last week was watching them go, well, we'll wait for we don't want to make too much of a comment because we'll wait for the official announcement. And you're like, that's not what you do on a news show where you see material evidence happening, right? You see what's going, you can watch, your troops are parked. There are that train car video, which I showed on my channel and some other people have seen, where there's a train that has been stalled outside of Belgorod in Belgorod Oblast. A refrigerator truck believed to be full of dead Russian soldiers. And it's been without electricity parked outside of this city. And the people there are arguing about the smell. They know this. The people on the news know argument. This. Yeah. That's just something John's used to.
Can't we talk about anything else
other than people complaining about the smell, right?
Yes.
But they know this, right? That it's not. You don't need the official word necessarily to see that they pulled out of these cities. And the what was the ultimate response from the Russian generals as to why? Have we got a final answer as to why they left? To reinforce, right?
No, of course not. Well, yeah, they've given all sorts of kind of excuses, but the response out of the Kremlin or the Russian defense ministry has been weak sauce from the get-go. The fact that the thing that troubles me about the chattering classes in Russia and these guys who do have their own network shows on. Everything is state-run television. So, but they have their own TV shows. We're starting to hear this rhetoric of, well, okay, now we can't try and occupy Ukraine. Now we have to destroy Ukraine.
Right. That's where it gets
we tried to come in. We tried to come in and we tried to occupy Ukraine. You guys wouldn't let us occupy your country. How rude of you! Mm-hmm. We're now going to flatten you. We have to flatten you. And okay, so it's not coming from official channels, but they use, as we've discussed in the past, Hal, they use these shows as a way to run something up the flagpole, see who will salute or who will, dismiss it, and then the Kremlin will make its decision based on
it's Tucker and the Republican
how they
Party.
think it'll go down.
It's Tucker and the Republican Party.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Right. Yeah.
So
I don't think that's a coincidence, by the way, but that's for another discussion when I'm wearing my tinfoil hat.
Sure. One of the fascinating things that I've been watching is this Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting where Putin's been left to hang, and Modi. There've been two big friendships that Russia is trying to garner in this. One is Turkey, of course, because it's a NATO country. The other one is India, and the reason for India is because India used to not buy any Russian oil and gas, and now they are the fastest growing market for a dwindling market. Now, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about Modi and his remarks and how Putin had to basically defend the Ukraine attack to his newest oil
dressing
market.
Down.
Yeah, it's not good. It's good. It is good because it wasn't good for the right people. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, now with 100% more Johnny Million and Philip Ittner. Follow at Philip Ittner on Twitter. That's 1L in Philip, 2 T's in Ittner. We'll be back. There you go.
You're listening to Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
All right.
I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more. Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Hoo-yah!
Now, for those of you just joining us, our friend Philip Ittner is with us. He's stateside right now. He's going to be heading back to Ukraine sometime in the near future at his own leisure. But we've just kind of been through the last 7 months together watching this unfold. And, you and I were hanging in there, and arguing that there's no way Russia is going to be successful in this at all. This is a mistake. And as it starts dawning on other people, it's fun to watch. I will say it's a little, upsetting that they didn't get on board earlier. But one of the last ones to come along, it seems, and curiously enough, troublesome for Russia, is Prime Minister Modi from India. This, again, India is an enormous country where people will tell you that, China has 1.3 billion people. I call that into question. Having spent a lot of time there, I call BS on that number. I think it's closer to 800 million, maybe even less. But India definitely has over 1 billion people. That place is packed. There's many people in that country, and they need a lot of resources as a developing country, and they'll take them from anywhere they can get. And so they have been taking Russia's oil, as part of this, like bucking the sanctions and buying Russian oil faster and more than any other. They are the biggest expanding market for Russian oil that there is. So this is a big deal. So, and they can, if they decided tomorrow, they're going to take, they're not going to take Russian oil anymore, and they're going to take it from the West or from OPEC countries or Venezuela, the rest of the world would sign off on that, and it would do them great business elsewhere. And there's a chance that they will. And Russia knows this. They could flip a switch and stop taking Russian oil. It's a pain in the butt anyways. It takes forever to get there by boat. It's not like they have a pipeline going to it. So it matters what Modi thinks of him. And this is a direct quote. So they made an appearance together where the prime minister made him wait, as everybody did. And Modi said to Putin, "Today's era is not an era of war, and I have spoken to you on the phone about this." Like, look, we've argued about this before, and now that you're sitting in front of me and everybody's watching, I'm going to tell them what I told you on the phone. That was...
Well, and the attitude was so much, and it's going to play so badly in Russia, because the attitude was very much like, I've talked to you on the phone, I've called you, and now I had to call you down to the office to tell you this to face. And it was a very much kind of like a principal having called in the naughty boy at school and wagged his finger at him. And that is not going to play well in Russia. Especially since it's Modi, especially since it's a brown, this racism in Russia is a huge factor, and they are not going to take it well, having somebody from the subcontinent give their president address.
Right. And then I will say this. So the other big move from that was Xi Jinping meeting with Putin for the first time in person since they said that they have an undying cooperation, which resulted in
undying friendship.
Nothing. They're not, they're just buying some stuff. They're not giving them tech. They're not doing anything. Iran is selling them drones because China won't. Like, it's that bad. But Where did Xi Jinping go first? He went to Kazakhstan. He met with the Kazakhstani prime minister before he met with Putin, and he only met with Putin amongst these other leaders. He did a solo trip to Kazakhstan before going to this thing. That is enormous. And I don't know how that the history of Kazakhstan and Russia's relation, because they had a
Central Asia and the expansion,
they had a puppet government in there in Kazakhstan up until a couple of years ago. And then the new guy was supposed to, hand it off and take the old guy and put him in a security position. And what did he do? He jailed him. He charged him with corruption. And now
they're all about reforms.
Yeah. And so they are meeting. They
all
met
throughout Central Asia. There's systems of reform going on.
Right, and that's a nightmare for Vladimir Putin and the system that they put in place, because you cannot operate that kind of kleptocracy with reforms. Now, here's my question: Are you? I mean, I know you've been kind of taking a break from some of this. Does it feel like a bum rush of information when it all comes in at once? Because this was such an enormous switch. Is everybody going, dude, like calling you from there?
No. Well, yes and no, because when you study Russia, when you study that part of the world, what tends to happen is you have long stretches of the status quo, and then you'll have these like events that'll happen. That'll be these huge upheavals, or just like it'll dominate the news cycle for the better part of a week, and then we'll go back to a status quo, and it'll trudge along for a while. That has been truncated into quick turnovers of that since the war started. But no, I mean, look, what's happening in Central Asia is, and I have been speaking about this since I've kind of come to LA, and I'm starting to transition back into going back to the region and starting to report and all the rest of it.
Right.
Is what I'm starting to talk to people about is, I think we need to start looking now past the Ukrainian war, because I think the war in Ukraine is look, it's a fait accompli. It's done. It's going to happen.
Putin has it all sewn up.
Their territory.
No, Johnny, no. That's not the message taken.
I can't wait. When I am sipping my champagne on Khrushchev on Victory Day, I am going to tweet out a picture of that, hopefully surrounded by beautiful Ukrainian women and joyous Ukrainian men,
right?
All celebrating, their independence. There really is their independence, and I'm going to put that tweet out with that photo to all of
the usual suspects,
all the guys who said, it's only a matter of time before Russia's going to win. We shouldn't be supporting the Ukrainians. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be wonderful. But I think what's happening in Central Asia is what I have started to talk to people about. Unhappy cat.
Yeah.
What I've started to talk to people about is the fact that we need to start already looking past the war in Ukraine, because eventually the war in Ukraine will be over. The Ukrainians will survive in one way, shape, or form. Crimea is still a big question, but I don't think there's any question that they're going to take the bulk of their territory back, if not all of it. And I think that that a lot of people are waking up to the fact of, okay, what happens the day after Victory Day in Ukraine, on Khrushchev in Kiev? What does that mean for Russia? What does that mean for Putin? What does that mean for that huge part of the globe that used to be part of the Soviet Union? And I think the Central Asian countries and China are already looking at that and saying, we don't have to listen to a word Moscow says,
right? Because
they can't back it up. That's going to be
well. They
devastating.
Also don't need.
So I think a lot. China's looking at Central Asia and going, mine.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Central Asia
Agreed. I mean, there's an argument that they could take that
Moscow's
space.
Power diminishing.
That's right. There's an argument that they think that they
everybody sees Moscow's power diminishing.
Right.
This was the worst move that a Russian leader has made since, I think, Tsar Nicholas II decided to go into the Japanese War, or decided to take command of his army during the First World War. And that led to the destruction of the Tsarist Empire.
Right.
What will this mean for Russia? And I've been saying to a lot of people, and I don't want to drag on for too much longer on this, and we'll go to another topic, but I have been saying to people a lot that what happened in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union was such a earth-shattering global event that the Russians themselves never actually have properly addressed. And Putin came in because Yeltsin was, I was in Russia, I was in Moscow in the 90s. I saw what that country was like.
Right.
I saw what the collapse of the Soviet Union did to the people of that country. And they were traumatized by it. They were traumatized by the 70 years of the Soviet Union and the KGB and the repressions. Of course you would. Lavrentiy Beria alone is should be a fixture of nightmare in every Russian child's mind. And what they did though is they repressed that, and they said, because of the chaos that's happening in Russia, we are not going to address what we've just been through with the Soviet Union. We're not going to address the trauma of what it is to be Russian for centuries under despotic system after despotic system. We now have, for the first time in our history, freedom and democracy and individuality, but it was chaos. And they said, the heck with freedom and democracy and all that. We want stability. And they repressed their trauma. They repressed the wounds that every Russian feels because of it was such an awful system.
Right.
And they just stuffed it down and said, just give us stability, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. Just give us law. Give us so we know what we're going to wake up to tomorrow morning.
Right.
And they just said, let's forget about the trauma. And that's 20 plus years of that. And so now the question is, with the collapse of the Putin system, which I think is a very real possibility, will the Russians ever now look in the mirror and go, we have been through a lot. We are traumatized. There is generational trauma in our history. We must address it. The Ukrainians are doing just that, by the way. Will the Russians? I don't know. But we are looking at what I think is the completion of the transition that should have happened in 1991, but because of the Yeltsin era and the carpetbaggers that came in from the West, they pushed it away. They said, we'll deal with that down the road. And they brought in Putin. So when Putin goes, will they finally look at themselves in the mirror, or will we get another despot?
Well, the question...
That's what I think we need to start looking past the Ukrainian war.
Right. I think there are two, and we got to take a break. We'll talk about this when back. I would call...
I'll get down off my soapbox.
Yes. And by the way, we're going to have show and tell for those watching the live stream after the next break from Phil as well.
I'm here.
Yes.
Listeners?
But I
got money on Phil not having pants on.
Oh, quit it. All right. So, but I will... I'm trying to tease into the break. I'm trying to be professional, guys. Come on. Is that I think that Russia's stability as a country is severely in question. That they are entering a phase that's like 1990, leading up to 1991, if it hasn't already jumped the shark. The question is how fast and how hard, and will the rest of the world be willing to go in and help, like in their own way, like they did last time, and accept them back into the fold, or are they just going to assume pariah state status? We'll talk about that when we come back. It's the South Park radio program, Mega Worldwide. Infotainmentwars.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Flank.
Wank.
Worldwide.
Welcome back to the show. So right before we get into this next point about the fact that I think China is trying to pick off petrostates from Russia in an attempt to find sources of energy for itself over the next 10 years while it watches its population cadaver. No pun intended. We'll discuss that in a second. But apparently, there's a bit of show and tell. I will, since radio is the theater of the mind, we'll explain it as well.
Yes, we also have to talk about Izium. We also have to talk about Izium at some point.
Right.
So as I was leaving Ukraine, I went through Lviv, as you normally do, to get out to Poland. And sadly, of course, Lviv, which is very much a tourist city and survives on tourism dollars, none of that is happening this year for obvious reasons, and I felt really bad about it. So I withdrew an awful lot of money from my account, and the 48 hours that I was there was me basically going from touristy shop to touristy shop and filling my bags with tchotchkes and all sorts of little knickknacks.
That's awesome.
So actually, I think you can see back there
Yeah.
on my
Nope.
Chase Lounger and my Airbnb here is filled with Vishivankas and dresses and jewelry and stuff that I'm giving out to all my friends, or I might have at an auction. But I brought these back for you guys specifically. Okay. So here we go. Show and tell, which is always great on radio. First off, this is for you, Hal.
Oh, it's the bomb defusal.
It's Patron.
Yeah.
It's you've got it written on the side. In Cyrillic. So for the listeners, this is a small little stuffed terrier.
Not a real one, a stuffed like a toy.
Does it explode?
Of Patron, the bomb-smithing dog,
right?
With his trident, Ukrainian.
Is it like the game Operation? Like if you mishandle it, it explodes?
Yeah, no. There's like there's.
Don't say that.
Don't pull the string again. Terrible. He's pulling the string on him. Sorry. That's
this
great.
This stuffed animal does not have that sound.
No, that's lovely.
But look, Malcolm Nance brought a javelin stuffed toy back for Stephanie Miller. So he stole my idea. Or I stole his idea.
All right.
One way.
That's beautiful.
Later. But I couldn't give you a javelin, so you're getting a.
I appreciate that. That's amazing.
Bomb sniffing dog.
It will have that's lovely. It will have a place of honor in the house. And then
Johnny, you have your choice now. Again, for the listeners, this is traditional Ukrainian embroidery is called a vyshyvanka.
A vyshyvanka.
And it's extremely beautiful. It's meticulously done. It's the embroidery there. So I've got a variety of sizes and colors, Johnny. And I've got kind of a brown with black. I've got white with blue.
Oh,
I told you, I went nuts.
He went crazy with it.
I felt so bad
by the way,
these guys.
for the record,
just sitting there. They're just sitting there in their stores.
I'm not the only person who, when they hear Vyshyvanka, doesn't think a Vyshyvanka would move with Jared to another country and never come back.
That's about the
Vyshyvanka had made $2 billion during. I Vyshyvanka.
So you tell me which color and style you would like, Johnny.
Oh my goodness.
He's good.
I always think of the Brazilian. Thing they whip around at football matches, the vuvuzela.
Oh yeah, the whistles, right?
The vuvuzela, yeah. The people in the chat were thinking I was just going to get a Heimar.
Yeah, he was just going to get a stuffed Heimar pillow.
Oh, and another person in the chat wants to know.
I would not be terribly surprised if there are stuffed Heimars.
Oh yeah.
Phil, do you have a publicly accessible Amazon wish list
for stuff you need?
I don't right now, but that's a good idea. Maybe I'll establish one.
That's a great idea.
If I do, I'll tweet it out and I'll send it to you, Hal.
I'm
also considering. I'm also considering an online auction to raise money for the people of Ukraine. There's a children's organization that I'm familiar with in Lviv, and I bought so many things that I thought, once I give everything away to friends and family, whatever's left, maybe I'll have an eBay auction.
That's a great idea.
And raise money.
Yeah, we'll post that as well, and there's actually a charity function on Twitch that I can use that I can link to that, and it will show up in the chat and on other stuff. So
I have a couple of questions from the chat for Phil. I know he's been checked out a little bit, but
sure.
Do you want to jump in on a couple of these, Phil?
I'll answer as best I can.
All right, so here's a real good general one from Ed's 3D Tech. How did the Ukrainian army just move so fast into eastern Ukraine?
Because it's their land. It's their land.
They knew the shortcuts.
It was so funny. They knew the shortcuts. They were welcomed with open arms. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos of these people embracing Ukrainian soldiers.
That was the best.
I mean, if you have a dry eye after watching some of those videos, you have no soul.
Yeah.
Just all those grandmas.
So amazing. And all those grandmas, all those, and also the sense of like, oh, our sons have come to free us, to liberate us. Because I am sure, judging by what happened in Izium, judging by the way the Russian soldiery operates, it cannot have been a fun occupation for those guys. I do not think it was a passive situation. I am sure that all those people who were under Russian control were brutalized.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you see it in their faces, and it's really moving. It's a beautiful thing. And I saw somebody talking recently about, like, is this now going to be an ebb and a flow? Are we going to see Russians pushing back? Is there going to be a counter offensive? And what happens when the Russians come back? Will they be able to take the land?
That's me, by the way.
The Ukrainians did.
That is...
To which my response is, if the Russians dare to try and come back, they will not find a population that will be as well, because they will not have the element of surprise.
Yeah.
They will not have a passive population that will just sit there and watch the Russians roll back into their towns.
Real quick, Philip.
Look, the land that the Ukrainians have taken, they've got for good. Go ahead.
The other thing too is the removal of people from Ukraine, of Ukrainians both, and then Russians bugging out, like the long lines of traffic that we have seen, are largely a mix of the people who Russia moved there to slowly own the land by soft occupation, by fanning out, giving people money to buy property and what have you, and then be basically paid loyalists. So you move in there, and then now those people are leaving.
Yeah, and let's not live in a fantasy land. There were collaborators.
Yeah,
there were people of Ukrainian nationality who may have been ethnically Russian or who may have been in sympathy with Russia and the idea that Russia sells, which is very much an Alex Jones kind of view of the world, where everybody is nefarious and power is good solely for power's sake, and if you have power, we can go into a whole bunch of that. But those guys who were pro-Russian, collaborators, sympathizers, what have you, they also, I am sure, are well aware that they will not be welcome. I mean, if you think about what happened to the collaborators in France when the Allies liberated, and the Allies kind of said, hands off, and the French went nuts.
Right.
The Ukrainians, I'm sure, have no love for those who decided to throw their lot in with the Russians. So I suspect there are a lot of Ukrainian nationals who are also fleeing right now because they know what will happen to them.
Right, because they've got place for them in Russia the same way Yanukovych did. I mean, the reality is a bunch of those guys and a bunch of the industry heads now live, to some degree, some of them live in Russia now. We got a couple minutes before the break. Real quick, nine Russian oligarchs dead in the last 3 months. Weird.
A lot of accident-prone Russian entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and one just fell off a boat and drowned.
I was about to say, are they drowning? That's really that's how you do it.
One of them fell off.
Slipping in the shower.
Yeah, a lot of being thrown out of or falling out a window, just clumsy. That it's like the Russian soldiers.
Really clumsy when you're standing. Yeah, if you're a Russian oligarch and you're standing at the top of a staircase, just be really careful.
Yeah, use the rail.
Don't slip on that banana peel.
Use the rail. Yeah. But and then there's
it's highly suspicious. And we all know what's going on. We all know what's going on.
These are murders, and so I don't know. Also, once a couple of them, I think you could convince some of these other oligarchs that they're safe. It was just that guy, and I'm the dude on the inside, and I'm going to be fine.
They all think that. Well, every Trump insider thinks that too.
Right. Well, it's
the same psychosis.
I'm the indispensable one.
Right. Well, at a certain point, though,
what happened to me? I'm the special one.
Except that's no longer true. They're hitting a number. I don't know what it was, whether it was 5 or 7 or 9, or once they reach a baker's dozen. A lot of the oligarchs are splitting for good, and a couple of them that have been killed, obviously, have been Gazprom guys overseas.
I mean, energy sector guys.
Yeah,
a lot of energy sector.
And then the most recent guy was the guy who's in charge of keeping the airlines flying over there. He was basically their FAA guy. He was the guy who fell off the boat. He drowned. The guy in charge of their planes drowned, which is fascinating. Poor guy couldn't swim or fly. But that's a line from a great Chicago film, Running Scared. But anyways, the fascinating part to me is that that guy alone they have stolen all the airplanes they use for commercial flight inside the country. They were leasing them from Ireland and Boeing and other countries and stuff. And then they just, once the war started, they're like, we're not giving them back. We're keeping them. And they can't service them. So they're pilfering planes for parts. And that's starting to wind down.
Cannibalizing them.
Yeah. And I'm sure that guy gave Putin some bad news he didn't want to hear, which is our airline industry is going to lock up because we don't have planes to fly. We can't keep airports open because you sent my tower guys and some of our pilots to Ukraine to get blown out of the sky in the first 2 weeks. We don't have air superiority because we can't. It's that's amazing. Let's take a break. We're going to come back.
Well,
hold that thought. I want your answer after the break.
I
want to see your answer after the break. This is the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome back to the show. I feel like we should cue up the happy ending song just since it's part of the happy ending is that there you go.
Let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will always be your funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky. Let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll be there to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. Cause isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you, chugga chugga choo choo, woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling. Let us smile together, whether the weather is cloudy or stormy. I will still be there in the morning. I'll be right by your side in the morning. I'll make you breakfast in the morning. I hope that you like cereal.
Yeah. So that's
Love
right.
cereal, by
That's
the way.
And to know that she's probably within a 10-mile radius. Of
That's
me
true.
right
If
now.
she's not touring,
Lovely old
that's
tree.
the other thing too. It's like now everybody's back out on the road again, so I don't see anybody anymore. Like anybody that I got to see post COVID in the window afterwards, everyone is scattered. Like, cause especially comics, everybody's out on the road. I am. We just got back from DC. We're going to Chicago next weekend. We'll be there for the Sexy Liberal show. Those of you, and I'm going to be on Joan Esposito's show this week for people listening to promote as well. But anyway, so we were talking a little bit.
And that's next weekend, Hal?
Yeah, that's next weekend in Chicago.
It's next weekend in Chicago?
Yes, yeah. So if you feel like,
and you're in Michigan right now, Phil?
No,
no,
he's
I'm
in LA.
but I might be. I might be. I'll let you know.
All right. If you are, you have a standing
Unlikely, but there's a slim
invitation. If not, I will. I'll come see you there. So we'll work it out. It's going to happen. So
and you can tease Stephanie that your Patron is better than her
her HIMAR,
whatever, javelin.
Or I mean, it's her javelin, right? Yeah. Okay. So right before the break, like I think the good news is you're safe back here, and also that you're going to go back and continue what you're doing, and all's well. And like I said, we're going to link people up to any way that you can help Philip in his efforts to, be a clear voice in Ukraine when he's there. If you want to, aid him in that endeavor, he was going to have perhaps an eBay auction. We'll see. Either way to raise money for Ukrainian children's charity as well. So we'll give you all that information as it unfolds, and we're just glad to have you here. That said, I think one of the biggest pieces of
glad to be here.
Happy ending news in reality is this, the idea that Russia is in a really bad way of their own making. And like the Atlantic Council has an article that literally says Putin's Russian empire is collapsing like its Soviet predecessor. They are. Wow. This is now. The worm has turned on this storyline, and people are having the conversation that you and I were talking about a month and a half ago, that we were not ready for the 91 fall of the Soviet Union. Nobody thought about it. It shocked the world. And when it happened, it was it was like the Wild West because nobody was prepped and everybody just rushed in to fill the gap. Whereas preparations for what that might look like and gaming it out right now seems to be the prevailing thought across a lot of the world.
Yeah, if you're paying attention, you can see it coming. Mm-hmm. It's right down the road. We're on the tracks, and it's almost inevitable that track is going to lead us to a new Russia, whatever that's going to be.
Right.
Look, we've been talking about it, you and I, Hal, for quite some time, but I think you're right. I think a lot of people are waking up to the reality that Russia is starting to fray at the edges. We talked about Russian oligarchs winding up dead. You're now seeing people in the public sphere, elected officials. Okay, admittedly, they're only local elected officials, but they're in St. Petersburg and Moscow, openly calling for Putin to resign. You never would have thought about that at any time in Putin's reign, certainly not during his rise to power.
And the fact that it's during wartime for them is crazy. Because, like America was not to change horses midstream because of George W. Bush during, his 2 terms. So, and that there's no threat of violence, unlike the maggots, I suppose. But during Bush's time, there was no threat that you'd have to worry about your life if you said, I don't know, I think maybe we need a new president. That's the reality they deal with all the time.
In Russia, yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Russia's system of government has always been very much a top-down, repressive, suppressive way of governing, because there is this, and we've talked about it many times in the past, a power dynamic within Russia that is very different than how we address power in the West.
Right.
And that is basically, if you have it, you need more, and you always need to be exerting your power. So to have somebody in a modern-day Russia talk truth to power. This is why they cracked down on Pussy Riot so hard. This is why they eliminated Boris Nemtsov. This is why all sorts of things
Navalny's offices.
Because it's a pressure cooker, and once the pressure starts to get too big, it starts, little, bits and pieces of the pressure cooker are popping off because the pressure is getting too great. This is Russia's history. It's cyclical. But I think this is a really historic moment in Russian history, because I don't know if this will be cyclical. I think that whatever happens after this, after the Putin era, even if we do go into a period of real serious despotism, if some guy who's even more stringent than Putin comes into power, I don't see him lasting long, because I don't know if the Russian people, who are now part of the global environment. Keep in mind, much of Russia's history has been Russia being separate from the rest of the world.
Right.
Even in imperial Russia, you didn't go abroad unless you were part of the ruling elite.
The internet has changed all of that. The awareness of the rest of the world and the ability to see it, see how other people live. It's really hard. The wall of propaganda is harder and harder to maintain. China's having a really hard time with it. Even North Korea's firewall fails regularly for a lot of people. This is a tough, it is weird. We live in the world of VPNs. People can get around that kind of stuff, and it's hard to, keep them down on the farm when they've seen gay Paris. And in Putin's case, I think, I'm curious, as I think a lot of people are, that how swift and how violent it might be versus him recognizing the writing is on the wall and trying to create a soft landing of his own to keep some of what he's got.
But how he does that, I have no idea.
Right.
Because look, when I was in Moscow, so there's a couple of things I want to address real quickly here, because I know we're drawing to a close. When I was in Russia, I saw the carpetbaggers that came in after 91.
Right.
We screwed that up. We should have been much more controlling, put restrictions, put regulations onto whatever, at least our American or British or French or German, we all should have done it and coordinated a post-Soviet era Russia. We did not do that. It was the Wild West. Everybody flooded in and grabbed everything that they could get their hands on until Putin came in and cracked down. And instead of giving it to foreign multinationals, he gave it to oligarchs. But this is 91 deferred. What is happening now is 91 that has just been kicked down the road. The can has been kicked as far down the road as it possibly could, which in a lot of ways, and we've discussed this, I think was a motivation for the Ukraine war itself. Because I think there was a sense in Russia that we need to bring in our near abroad, as they call it, and bring that back in. Otherwise, we are going to collapse ourselves. We must consume. We must broaden. We must always be bringing these near abroad to heal. And now that has not worked, and Ukraine will be an independent nation, with a very different view of what it is to be Slavic, with a very different idea of what it just means to
be a
be
world
post-Soviet
citizen.
nation,
Right.
and deal with the trauma and be a world citizen and deal with the trauma of the past centuries. Russia now is going to have to look in the mirror, and it's not something they do comfortably. So, you know, I think we now have to look at the fact that Russia is now the story, not the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war is on a course to being a victory for Ukraine, full stop. Crimea is the big question. But the question now is what happens after the war. And that means Russia. And we should be very, very concerned, and we should be involved.
Right. I think two things.
Involved in the sense of like helping.
Right. I agree.
Interfering.
I think we were more afraid of nukes getting loose and stabilizing some form of government, because if they ran off and they ended up in the hands of terrorists, that was our primary concern in 91. And so we looked the other way about the business and the economic aspects of it, because we figured it would sort of take care of itself. And the biggest scare was, you know, one of these side countries getting this. The other thing I want to know is, and this will be a question for when we sit down together and in the future, at what point do Georgia and Chechnya and these other satellite states that have been in, you know, dealing with Russia for this period of time decide, you know what, the line has been crossed in Ukraine, it's our turn. And before the end of the Ukraine conflict, they decide, you know what, we want our land back too. That is the biggest nightmare facing Russia right now. That's it.
We'll talk about that after the show or in person or whenever you like. But before the show ends, as a British citizen, rest in peace, Elizabeth II. I miss you. You will be mourned. And that was tough.
Lovely.
So, R.I.P. Elizabeth.
Thanks so much.
I know you're an anti-monarchist, but
That's
I'm a British citizen.
I understand.
Rest
Fear
in
not.
peace, Elizabeth.
Fear not.
You're a great woman.
And on that note, we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Chicago. Thank you, Johnny Million. Keep calm and carry on, as the Queen would say. And then, of course, we'll see you guys next week. Hang in for the post show for a couple minutes, if you guys want.
Yep.